So, our speaker today is the Venerable Samiddha, aka Venerable Falun. He was born in Medan, Indonesia. In 2014, he studied Buddhism at the Fuyuan Buddhist Institute in Taiwan. In 2015, he joined the monastic under the guidance of Venerable Ikaranya in Malaysia. In 2018, he graduated from Fuyuan Buddhist Institute as the best graduate in his class. After graduating, he actively preached and taught Buddhism in Indonesia and Malaysia. From 2019 to 2023, he came to Houston to pursue his academic studies in philosophy and religion. At the same time, he assisted the Texas Buddhist Association in conducting various religious services and delivering Dharma talks. Now he is attending graduate school at the University of Washington in Seattle, conducting study and research in Buddhist studies. His expertise include early Buddhist manuscripts, the history of Indian Buddhism, meditation, philology, and philosophy. One of his mottos is to live your life wholly and entirely with all the bitterness and sweetness, for the next life is so mysterious.
Okay, good morning all. I hope you're all well and at peace. So I'm gonna share my screen and we're gonna continue our lesson today on the Heart Sutra. And before we begin, hold on. Okay, before we begin, let us recite the verse to pay homage to the Buddha. Join your palm together. Namo tassa bhagavato
Bhagavato
arahato
Arahato
sama sambuddhassa.
Sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa
Namataso
bhagavato
Bhagavato
arahato
Arahato
sama sambuddhassa.
Sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa
Namataso
bhagavato
Bhagavato
arahato
Arahato
sama
Sama
sambuddhassa.
Sambuddhassa.
All right, so this is the second talk of the Heart Sutra, the essence of wisdom. So last time we left off on this part, which is the question on how to cultivate wisdom. The Heart Sutra is all about the essence of wisdom. But before we look at the content of the Heart Sutra about wisdom, we can look into the sutra first before we look into our text. So maybe some of you who have read the sutra or the Nikayas, you might know this sutra, Majjhima Nikaya 70, called Gita-giri Sutta. It's talking about the wisdom. So the Buddha asks his disciples or tells his disciples that the final knowledge or the knowledge of liberation is achieved not all at once, but it is achieved by gradual training, by gradual practice, and by gradual progress. By that, it means that we have these all 12 steps to cultivate wisdom and to realize nirvana. So the first step is to visit a teacher. Pretty common in Indian literature and Indian culture to visit a teacher and receive teaching and instruction from the teacher. And if we are talking about nowadays, 2024 in the West especially, we might not always visit our teacher. Instead, we turn into the book. So some people will say that 2,500 years ago, it's the era of listening. That's why the sutras always begin with thus I have heard, or it was heard by me. So it was the era of the ear or the listening, but today it is more about thus I have seen, because it is more about the era of reading and looking at the text by yourself. And then the second step is to pay respect to the teacher. The second step is to give ear, meaning listen or hear the Dharma. And in our contemporary era, it's more about our eyes looking and reading and contemplating on the text or on the scripture. And then we have to memorize it, even though not all of us memorizes the sutra anymore. We can have it on our side or on our phone. I don't memorize the sutra anymore because we can have it on our hand. Not like the previous times. During the ancient era, everything is, based on memorization, otherwise you'll lose it. And then the sixth step is to examine the meaning of the teaching that one has memorized. The seventh step is to gain a reflective acceptance of those teachings. This is such a technical term, but in a simpler term, it means faith, right? Faith in Buddhism, it's not a blind faith that you believe or have faith in some kind of non-existence or unknown entity out there, but rather it's more about acceptance by heart through our own examinations, investigations. And then after the teachings are proven, we have this kind of acceptance, yeah, or what we call faith. And then zeal springs up in him. He applies his will, he scrutinizes, and then he strives, putting a great effort to practice the teaching. And finally, one realizes with the body the supreme truth and sees it by penetrating it with wisdom. So the flavor of today's talk and the upcoming talks will be more about wisdom, deep contemplation. We see the kind of the core of the teaching of the Buddha lies in its wisdom. So we don't see any kind of spiritual thing, any kind of ritual, any kind of divinities in this kind of series talk, because we are talking about our internal wisdom. So wisdom is very different from divinity or soul or spirituality. There's nothing to do with that, but more into our everyday life, but more into it. It's more profound and deep. So which stage in religious or spiritual path are you now? Are you still sleeping like a baby, unconscious about the wisdom of the Buddha and the reality around you? Or you started to walk step by step in the path of Dharma? Or you can already ride the bicycle of wisdom and balance yourself in every step you take. So you have to contemplate this. The point is, before you can walk, right, don't try to run. Before you can run, don't try to ride a bicycle. Everything needs steps, progress, and even patience. Don't rush. If you can't understand at all today's talk, it's fine. Not everybody at the same level, right? But still, you might want to listen and know a little bit about it and just squeeze a little bit lesson from today's talk and then practice it and put it into practice in your life. So this is the whole Heart Sutra that we talked about last time, and today we are going to talk about the introduction part only. And later you'll see, even just from the beginning, the teaching is already deep, let alone the core teaching and the conclusion. We are just going to talk introduction and the first part of the core teaching. So the introduction says, Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, when practicing deeply the perfection of wisdom, realized that the five aggregates are all empty. He overcame all sorrow and suffering. See? The hardest part is in the middle of the sentence. When practicing deeply the perfection of wisdom, a lot of technical terms here, a lot of jargon in Buddhism here, right? What is deep? What is perfection of wisdom? And even if you listen on YouTube, monks or teachers teaching about the Heart Sutra or about the wisdom in Buddhism, we must encounter this key term, namely five aggregates. And the other thing is emptiness, right? So what is deep? What is the meaning of deep? So it says that emptiness, or in Sanskrit, shunyata, is deep. So what is shunyata? In Sanskrit, shunya literally just means zero, zero. Do you think the number zero is an existence or not? If you think zero is nothingness and you look at your bank account, more 10 to the bank account is a big money, and less 10 in the bank account is a big money loss. So zero is such a big thing, an important thing. You might want to lose $9 instead of zero at the end of the balance, right? So zero, from the worldly perspective alone, from the mathematical perspective alone, it is not non-existence. It exists. So emptiness, right? Empty plus ness, meaning the state that is empty of self and dharmas. If you are reading the Nikayas or Theravada tradition, the emptiness is just the state that is empty of self. But Mahayana adds one more, which is dharma, or all phenomena that we'll see later. What does it mean by empty of self? It means not without change, not independent, and not real. Because self means permanent, independent, and real. But emptiness means there is no such thing in our world. So the way we understand emptiness is like our Diamond Sutra, by negation, negation of self. And now we are entering into the core teaching of Buddhism that are common to all Buddhism, which are the five aggregates. So what is aggregate? We use to listen to this technical term aggregates, but in reality, nobody speaks aggregates today. It's such a big word, right? So aggregates, if you want a simpler term, it means assemblage or just collection, from the Sanskrit root skant, to collect, meaning this is a collection. A collection of what? We have five collections. So these five aggregates are not just five things, but five collections divided into five categories. The first one is form aggregates, meaning in the form aggregates, we still have so many things inside that makes the form aggregates or the materials. And the definition of form aggregate is the obstruction of space and susceptibility to decay. Meaning, form is a material thing or the physical world. If we put our, for example, our cup or our glass here on the table, it occupies the space, right? In the empty room, if we put all our furnitures inside, it's no longer empty in a sense, but it's filled. So these materials fill up the space. That's why it obstructs the space. And then the second meaning is that these kinds of things will break one day. It will decay no matter what. The second aggregate or collection is the sensation or feeling collection. And it means we have three kinds of feelings: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And then the third collection is concept or perception, some translations say. It means knowing, thinking, connecting ideas, dissecting, summarizing. Any kind of activities that deal with thinking, processing information, that like you all are doing now, listening, try to understand, try to connect ideas that you've known before. These are all the activities of concept aggregate. And then we have mental formation aggregate, meaning volition, decision maker, and more precise meaning is mental activities that are not governed by sensation and concept aggregates. We'll see this later. What is this? And then consciousness collection or the knower, or a lot of religions say this is the soul, which actually it's not. Knowing the sensation, concept, and mental formation aggregates, meaning knowing the other four collections, is the work of consciousness or the knower. So if you just look at these five English translation, the hardest one to understand is the fourth. What is mental formation, right? What is formation and mental? For lay people out there, you might not be familiar with this Buddhist term, but actually it just means the mental factors. So I have this picture or illustration for y'all. The basic substances of five aggregates or of our body, what makes up our life, actually only consists of three things. Only three things. The first one is the form or form aggregate, the first out of five skandha. And then the second one is the fifth, consciousness collection. And this consciousness, according to some Buddhist tradition, it lies in our heart, the physical heart. And according to our modern, knowledge, it's in our brain. So it doesn't matter, but we still have this kind of consciousness. And the third thing is the mental factors, meaning mental factors is all the mental activities that are associated with consciousness. So we only have one form, meaning our physical life, and then we only have one consciousness arises at a time, accompanying by several mental factors. And these mental factors is the fourth in our five aggregates. So if you look back into the five aggregates, the substance of five aggregates only three: number one, number four, and number five. Number two and three technically is part of number four, right? Because we only have our physical world and mental world, just like, Cartesian or Rene Descartes, is our mind and body different or the same? In our Western thinking philosophy, we only divide this life into mind and body and maybe soul. So if you want to match into the Western conception of life, we can say that this form is our body, this consciousness is our mind, or our soul, and this mental factors is our mind, even though it's not the case, but just for the sake of understanding. And why are the sensation and concept single out? Because the experience by sensation or feeling and concept are directly connected to our experience as humans, especially it results in craving. We crave the things that we love, and we hate the thing that is unpleasant to us. So craving, hating, or grasping are just part of the craving. And the concept is our mental construct. We are constantly labeling things that we know or we don't know. Oh, we label this self as self. We label or we understand or we perceive our life as permanent. We perceive or we understand that we have this kind of unchanging self or soul. This is the concept, and it relates to our delusion. So these two mental factors are especially singled out in the five aggregates because it's directly related to our experience as humans. And these two, craving and delusions, are the basic ingredients of samsara. You know, if you read the sutra more enough, you read that who are our parents in this cycle of life and rebirth? Our parents are the father is delusion and the mother is craving. And because of these two basic components that are arisen from sensation and concept, right? It arises together with consciousness, and consciousness needs to relies on the form, on the physical material, or on the body. That's why we are in the samsara again and again and again. So these five aggregates make humans humans. So if you want, or if you want to try to kind of separate the mind from the body, thinking that there is a soul independent of the body, then this is the false view. It's not correct because the consciousness cannot arise solely on its own. It needs the body to think. We need our brain, like physical brain, and even we need our mouth to tell somebody that I have soul or I have self. If you don't have this kind of mouth, any kind of teaching can't be done. That's why the physical body in Buddhism is very important because it sets as the base of all kind of mental activities. Even though mental factors or mental activities lies on the consciousness, it's not directly lies into the form, but still the consciousness need the form or the physical body. So the amount of mental factors, different tradition explains it differently. Some say 52, 51, or 42. So to make these five aggregates matter, I want you to think about some of these questions. What is the self or soul? What is it? A lot of us maybe think that, oh, this kind of thinking is religious thinking. I don't have to bother learning it all. Who am I? And the next question may be more challenging because am I merely the body? Or am I more than just the body? Or am I not the body? So which am I? Is the body really matter? Or is it just the soul that matter? We study or we learn religion, we practice all kind of virtues and ethics just to purify our soul so we can have a good ending at the end of our life. Is it just the soul, not the body? So I want you to challenge yourself by thinking in a tragic accident where bodies are collected, why does or why are the bodies of the victim still need to be collected if all that matters are the soul? Why people are striving to find the body so that we can bury them properly, or what? Why are people so sad in the case of accident or tragic one that when the rescuer cannot find the bodies of the victims? Why? Is the body really matter in our life? So we know that by this kind of teachings on five collections, we know that actually what makes a human human is the body and the mind and all the mental activities, right? So this introduction of the sutra teaches us about contemplating the five aggregates. And before we contemplate the five aggregates, we constantly understand that we have this kind of self or soul. What is the meaning of soul? It's real independent existence. It's one and one only, and it's eternal. This is our basic, right, understanding of soul. But actually, according to Buddhism, five aggregates is kind of the opposite, exact opposite of the self. It's dependent, you know. Five, you see, five aggregates have 5 components. So it's not one and one only. It's many, at least 5. And it's impermanent, right? And according to all traditions of Buddhism, this very single existence in life is just these 5. These 5 are the real existence, right? If you reduce it to form or to consciousness, that's it. Can no longer divide it into any smaller entity. But in Mahayana Buddhism, we are in the Mahayana city limit here. We have to realize the 5 aggregates itself are empty. So we have to take a step further from self to aggregates, and even the aggregates are empty. Meaning that even though we know form, sensation, concept, mental factors, and consciousness, each aggregate is also dependent on other factors like form collection. Form aggregate alone cannot arise by itself. It needs a lot of factors, smaller factors, for it to arrive. So here we take another step further into contemplating that even the aggregates are empty. Very different from what you've learned before, maybe, right? So this is Mahayana. Moving on to the core teaching here, right? So we have the core teaching, it consists of many steps. And the first step is like this. O Sariputra, form is not different from emptiness. Emptiness is not different from form. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And the same goes for sensation, concept, mental formation, and consciousness. In other words, it's talking about 5 aggregates, but only take one example here as an example. So form, sensation, concept, mental formation, and consciousness, in other words, 5 aggregates are not different from emptiness. Emptiness is not different from 5 aggregates, and so on. So here, right, we have this kind of 4 sentences, consists of not different from and is. What does it mean by not different and is? Isn't that just the same thing? Subtle differences, right? So we take one example from the first aggregate, which is form. Actually, it's applicable to all the other 4. We say form is not different from emptiness. Emptiness is not different from form. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. It's not like a language game, huh? It has a deep and profound meaning in it, right? So let us dissect it a little bit further. So form is the appearance, and emptiness is the essence. Basically, it's saying appearance is not different from essence, or emptiness is not different from entity, like self is not different from emptiness, or good is not different from bad. Bad is not different from good. If you want to take it this way, you can too. And the meaning, it implies interconnectedness or non-duality. Especially in the Western way of thinking, we tend to think it in 2 ways, good or bad, sacred or profane, you and I. But actually, it's really connected one to another. So to understand what is the meaning of form is not different from emptiness, we have to understand it this way. Without emptiness, form cannot be obtained, right? To understand form is emptiness, it means that without form, emptiness cannot be shown. Can you understand it? It's beyond language to explain, and it's really hard to explain, even harder to understand. What is this? What is it saying? It means that emptiness is not independent of 5 aggregates. So it's not, like I said before, it's not duality between good and bad. It's not like a clear line dividing the two. And it not just like the Eastern way of thinking either. It's not like in the good you have one bad side, and in all the bad people they have one good side. It's not yin and yang, and it's not the battle between good and evil. So what is it? I try to think it as this way. What is this? A gradation, a blending, and interconnectedness independent to one another kind of thinking, right? I don't want to tend or lean toward the Western duality or Eastern kind of submerged into one another. But Buddhist way, especially the middle way of thinking this is they are relying on each other. So if you're thinking this way, what is good and bad? I just use the analogy of good and bad just to illuminate this emptiness and form, even though the concept is not that simple. So if you think about evil and good, can it be good without bad, right? Or if you think it the other way, can it be any bad or evil things if there is no good? So a lot of things in this world is all relative or comparative, right? Or in proportion to one another. We can't say anything is beautiful if there is no ugly. We can't say anything tall if there is no short, right? This is the basis to establish the thinking or the world. So again, it applies the same. Nirvana or the sacred is dependent upon the profane, right? Or the non-sacred. Nirvana, right? If we understand this emptiness as nirvana, and this form as our samsara or the life cycle, we can only attain liberation if we live in this world, right? And also, we have our samsara because nirvana exists, because there is emptiness. That's why we are constantly living in this cycle of life and rebirth, because emptiness by itself means that everything can change. That's why I can be born, then I can die. If there's no emptiness, someone who has not born yet will not ever be born because the state is in fixed, you know? You get what I mean? If there is no emptiness, if there is no possibility to change at all, someone who do evil or someone bad will always be bad the whole life in eternity. And someone's good will always be good for eternity because there's no possibility to change at all because there's no emptiness as the basis. But since we have the probability to change, thus all this kind of worldly thing, good and bad, and somewhere in the middle arise. All right, so the key insight here is that appearance is essence, nirvana and the word as non-dual. They are not two totally separate things, right? So the sentences that you're looking on the screen right now is kind of the engaged Buddhism, right? So actually the teaching of wisdom is a kind of engaged Buddhism rather than disengaged Buddhism. It's not asking you to retreat to the forest and just do your own meditation to separate yourself from the crowdness in the city. Not like that. Rather than seeing nirvana as an escape from the world, it is an integral part of existence. True liberation involves embracing the world fully rather than rejecting it. Why? Because we should not avoid the world in favor of isolation. Genuine realization happens through active engagement in the world, especially in compassionate acts that benefit others. In order to perfect our perfections, we have 6 or 10 in total. We need to engage in the world by practicing our generosity, patience, morality, and even compassionate acts, and self-purification through service. Serving others and participating in life allows for self-transformation and realizing deeper truths, blending spiritual and worldly life into a harmonious practice. This is kind of the takeaway of looking or understanding appearance is essence. They are not separate. So one day, if you have your reasoning, if you think that, oh, you don't want to do this kind of things anymore because you're done with the world, you just want to retreat to the forest and do your practice, it's not really in a good direction according to this teaching, right? You have to engage actively with a meaning on the back of our head that even though we are doing all kind of the worldly stuff, but we are not contaminated by them. Kind of like the metaphor of lotus flower, even though they grow from the mud, but they are not affected by it. So we have steps in practice, right? According to Heart Sutra, from selfish to selfness, and then to non-self. And before we can get into the ultimate goal of our practice, we need kind of a bridge in the middle, selfless. And how do one practice selfless in life? Engaging the world, right? You need to interact with one another to test your own selfishness. Are you selfish enough or are you selfless already? And then for personal gains, like money or merits or honor and profit into sharing merits, how much can you practice generosity to one another by with your own personal gain, and then into the practice of the Diamond Sutra. We've talked a lot about merit is not merit, therefore it's called merit. And then from self-centeredness into soften our hearts and letting go. There are steps in every practice, especially in Buddhism. A lot of the times we put our expectation too high that the first day we enter into the Kuan Yin Hall, I want to be able to let go everything, but then you ended up not having done anything, still being self-centeredness, because we forget the middle part, which is the process of learning itself. And then we have to face challenge before we can respond it with wisdom and compassion. We need to have some kind of fluidity. If the environment can't change, we have to change our way to perceive something or do something. If we can't really change our way, we have to change our mind or our heart. We, we no longer craving or want to do it the way we want to do it. Just be flexible to everyone, right? And lastly, I just want to give you this quote by President John F. Kennedy. I think this is still very, very influential quote even until today, right? To practice selflessness. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, especially we are in the post-election period, right? We don't want to just blame who is the president or who should be the president, rather just focus on ourselves, what we can do for the better country. All right, so I hope you all are learning today, and before we move into the Q&A session, let us do the transfer of merits. Join the together. May my merit leads to the
Leads to destruction of the pollutants.
May my merit be a condition for
For
gaining
gaining
nirvana.
nirvana.
I
I
share my
share
portion of
portion
merits with all
with all
beings.
beings.
May
May
all
all
of
of
them
them
share my portion of
portion
merits
of merits
evenly.
even.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you. let's see if there's any questions or... Oh, I have some questions on the chat here.
I think the first one was from Suk. Would you say interconnectedness is just causes and conditions and a process of changes?
Okay. So interconnectedness is cause and condition, but not just cause and condition. It's more into that. It's more into, the literal meaning of interconnected. We are connected to one another. So if you think it this way, why do one become a murderer, for example? Or why do one become a theft or a thief? Because ourselves. We are in responsibility for all the badness that happens in the world, right? If you think about the cause and conditions further back, and then it will relate to us. That kind of thinking is interconnectedness. So who is to blame? Ourselves first, if you want to blame someone. That's why we don't blame, because we strive for a better world to live by starting from ourselves. And then the chain, will change one by one. And then, yeah, Bruce?
Okay, yeah, a while back I used to think that the Theravada and the Mahayana view disagree, but now I kind of think they agree. The Theravada says that the five aggregates of the Paramatma are ultimate reality. But the Mahayana says even though they're the five aggregates, they're still empty of a permanent self. So those actually agree with each other, don't they?
They, of course, they agree with each other, but there's some key differences in the end, in which Mahayana will perceive that the five aggregates are empty, but the Theravada tradition will not see it this way. The emptiness in Theravada tradition is just the empty of self, not dharma. But five aggregates are dharma. There are difference between self and dharma. Self is something that related to ourself as human beings, but dharmas is outside of outside of beings, like the nature, the world out there is also empty according to Mahayana, but especially in the teaching of the Buddha itself, according to Mahayana, they're all empty too. So
Okay.
there are no such thing as paramata, like the ultimate existence as in Theravada. In Theravada, if you read Abhidharma, we have four ultimate realities, which is the form, right? And then the consciousness, the mental factors, and nirvana. These are four ultimate realities, meaning they're real. They are not empty. They're real. But Mahayana, Mahayana even sees nirvana is empty, let alone
Oh,
the other three.
wow, yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah,
You're
I
welcome.
guess they disagree then.
They are agreeing with each other at the basic points, but then expand it further into more deep contemplation.
All right,
And
thank
it's
you.
hard to explain, yeah. Any other more questions? I know questions might be little because either everyone understands clearly, right, or not understanding at all, duality, or maybe somewhere in the middle.
We do have a
Yes.
question in the hall.
My question is, I still don't quite understand how does emptiness and form, how are they synonymous? I think that's a core part of the teaching today. It's very technical and I'm not sure I understand. Can you explain, please?
Can you repeat that question for me?
Okay. Sorry, this may be because of our mic. One more time, so I can repeat it.
Help me understand how are form and emptiness synonymous?
How are form and emptiness synonymous?
Yeah, that's the point of the teaching today. Um, form is not synonymous to emptiness in the sense that they are literally the same. They are in an equal place in terms of they are independent, not independent, they are dependent, not independent, they are dependent on other factors. They are not real, right? And they are not permanent. So they are equal in this kind of thinking. We have the bridge in between, in the sense that, you know, not not independent, not real, and not permanent. That's why they're equal in this sense.
So it's not saying they're the same thing, but they have similar characteristics and they can be seen the same way, I guess is what the teaching is.
Right, yes. So not in the appearance that they are the same, but the characteristic itself, yeah. And that's why what makes emptiness is so important is that we need this kind of basis in the world to establish everything. If we don't have emptiness in the world, it means that the world in a fixed situation or in a fixed position that there is no change possible. Yeah. Changing can be good, you know. Yeah. Eva? Eva? You are muted.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Wonderful. Your teaching is so way beyond what I have heard before. And also, especially the path, from, self to selfless, to, for example, to non-self. But I'm wondering how much is, just because of my ignorance, how much is your interpretation and how much is it based on Buddha's teaching?
About what?
About your teaching today. Because,
How much?
this is, something that I am so impressed with. I, never thought of it in this way, never heard of it in this way. So my question, may I ask, just because of my ignorance, that is this your interpretation of Buddha's teaching, or is it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, some of them are my interpretation, but I try to stick with the sutra itself and the commentary. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
So I had a question. It seems like this this sutra's focus on emptiness and even boiling down like the five aggregates to also being emptiness. It seems like it's a response to what almost seems like the five aggregates becoming something that's permanent, as opposed to, because like fundamentally there shouldn't be something that is permanent. I mean, is that sort of the right track here? Is this what that's a response to? Is like trying to make the five aggregates like permanent objects or something?
Yeah, so according to the mainstream or Theravada tradition, they don't see the five aggregates as permanent things either, but they just stop there. So the point of reference, if you want to refer to humans, if you want to reduce into the smallest thing, it stops at the five aggregates. And then you practice with the five aggregates only. But then Mahayana, they're kind of taking a step further to see that you don't stop at five aggregates, but you stop at nowhere. Because if you say you stop at emptiness, it implies that emptiness is there, but it's actually not. Yeah, we tend to use this term a lot, emptiness, but there is always another way to understand emptiness rather than just being a technical term that we used to say, but we are losing the real meaning or the sense of emptiness anymore. That's why we have to be careful when we try to memorize things. Just like five aggregates, we used to say it a lot and a lot, but actually it consists only of the main substance is three, right? Because sensation and perception or concept are also part of the mental factors, but then they are singled out because it relates very real into our experience. Five aggregates is, you guys, do you know what is five aggregates that we've been talking about throughout the talk today? It's another way to say soul. So in Buddhism, we don't have soul, like one single eternity soul, but we have these five things. So if you ask, what is the thing that reincarnate from life to life? My answer is these five aggregates reincarnate. I don't want to boil down into one thing like consciousness, because the real thing that is being reborn is this five, right? We are born with a new body, new feeling, new perception, new mental factors, and new consciousness. It's not that we are leaving behind our body and then the consciousness travel to the next life. This kind of concept implies that there's soul, that the soul enter into the new body. The body is already there for the consciousness to enter. But the fact is, they are all together from the consciousness and then forming the new form. So we grew with this kind of appearance, with this kind of face, with this kind of, physical posture, physique, because of our consciousness, because of our karma. So where is karma rely in this scenario? Karma lies in the mental formations. We've seen that we have 52 or 51 or 42 mental formations. Karma is in one of them. And it leads to our life. Not only our life as a being, not only life in this being, but also our environment are caused by these five aggregates, because we have this karma and consciousness. And then during our life, as we grew up, at one point we meet each other at Guan Yin Hall today, but then at one point we are separated in the future. These are all conditioned by karma and five aggregates in general, if you want to say. Yeah, Eva?
Your teaching in this Heart Sutra is so fundamental in terms of understanding the Buddhism. For example, the five aggregates. I'm struggling with it. I'm just wondering whether you could expand your lecture on this Heart Sutra, or double the amount of your material, so that I can have a better understanding of what I've been reading or learning. So I would like to make a request to expand your teaching.
We'll expand the teaching as we go on, and the next couple months or couple sentences of the Heart Sutra will reinforce your current understanding of the five aggregates. It's always the case like that. So as we go on, all the previous knowledge will be reinforced. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. You can make it into a 1-year program if you
Oh,
want to.
no, not that long. Heart Sutra is only that short. We can't make it any longer. Otherwise, it'll no longer a Heart Sutra. It's all my interpretations at the end.
But it's all the underlying concept,
Right. Yes.
that
Yeah.
I'm talking about.
Yes. Yeah.
Emptiness, form. It's a very good, 1,000 feet level explanation. But if you can go deeper, or I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy?
Yes, Bhante, so we know that there's not a permanent soul that goes on from this life to the next life. So how do we explain what carry on from this life to the next life? We know after the five aggregate, the form, the feeling, the perception, the mental formation all gone when you pass away. Maybe just the consciousness. So how do we explain what carry on from this life to the next life?
Yeah. So like I said before, the things that are carried on to the next life are the five aggregates, the same way as we understand. If we can understand easily that the consciousness is the thing that goes on to the next life, but why can't we understand that form is also carried out the same way and the feelings too? Yeah, so what carries on? Actually, it's all or nothing, like all the five aggregates, or you can think that nothing carries on the next life, but still the carrier, like kind of this transmission from the next life is not, it's not like a single line that connect from this life to next life. It's all kind of like, you know, it arises and then it disappear, and then it arise and it disappear. In one of the Abhidharma, it says that it's only cause and effect. You know, the cause is that we die in this life, and then the next life is the effect of our current life. So there's only cause, effect, cause, effect, cause, effect. So we don't want to think it that the carrier and the carrier carries the things into the next life. But if you still struggling with that, the easiest explanation is of course by saying consciousness is the thing that travels from life to life. Consciousness, if you answer consciousness, it's not wrong. A lot of Mahayana Sutra will say that. But if you want to be precise, we can look at as cause and effect. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But how do you? Okay, so it's easier to understand that maybe the consciousness go from this life to the next life. But how do you explain, like you say, the five aggregate goes on to the next life too? Because the next life could be reborn in the heaven or in the hell, and you don't even, or maybe you don't even have the form.
Right. That's why I say, not that the form is carried away from this life to the next life, but it's all transformed into a new thing. Just like your consciousness, even though you think that we carry it from the past to present, but actually it's not the same, and it's not similar, and it's not different. You know, our 5-year-old and our present body and life, is it different? Is it the same? No different and no same. But then what carries from our childhood to our adulthood, it's more on the cause and effect, because we eat, we sleep, we grow, and that's it. So it's very subtle. If you want to think about it, you can start by looking at our 5-year-old self, to our present, and then to our future. What makes us not similar and not the same? Is there something that carries us? Of course, these five aggregates, right?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we are time up, or we have
Yes.
more questions. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank y'all very much.
You have a
Thank
great day.
you.